Hello, and welcome to our special virtual fireside chat for the Captain Nichola Goddard Leadership Series. I'm Eleanor Taylor. I served for 27 years in the Canadian Armed Forces and now work at True Patriot Love Foundation, and I will be your moderator for today's discussion. True Patriot Love is Canada's foundation for the military community. To date, the foundation has raised over $47 million, funded nearly 1,100 community programs, and supported over 41,000 people. Today's fireside chat is in honor of Captain Nichola Goddard. Nichola was a trailblazing leader in the artillery. She was known for her competence, her compassion, and her optimism. She was tragically killed in combat in Afghanistan in 2006. And she was the first Canadian woman to be killed in a combat role. She was only 26 years old. In partnership with Nichola's family, True Patriot Love stewards the Captain Nichola Goddard Fund, which raises funds for programs across Canada that support service women, women veterans, and their families. The leadership panel, which has been running for 7 years, offers an opportunity to bring together exceptional leaders to share insight and have frank discussions about military leadership from a woman's perspective. Over the next 45 minutes, we will hear from two inspirational leaders who served in the military in important roles at different times, and who both went on to serve their community after they left the military. We are going to hear firsthand from them about their experience and perception of how the CAV shaped them, both during their service and beyond. We have viewers from across the country today, and we have received a lot of really great questions. So thank you all for sending those along, and you will hear many of them integrated in today's discussions. Before we go any further, I would like to take a moment to thank Sydney Hall from Lysander, who is our national presenting sponsor, and invite her to say a few words. Sydney?
Thank you, Eleanor. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sydney Hall, and I'm one of the sales coordinators here at Lysander Funds. And on behalf of Lysander, it is both an honor and a privilege to speak before you today as the national sponsor of the 2025 Captain Nichola Goddard Women in Leadership Series. We are grateful to be part of such an inspiring and impactful occasion, and we extend our warmest welcome to you all, veterans, current service members, participants, and supporters from the private sector. At Lysander Funds, we believe in the power and the need for strong female leadership. Over the course of my year here at the firm, I've had the privilege of working alongside a group of intelligent and motivating women who continue to inspire me every day. We jumped at the opportunity to support this event to honor the memory of a courageous female leader in the Canadian Armed Forces, Captain Nichola Goddard. Today's Women in Leadership event is more than just a gathering. It's a celebration of leadership and the honoring of the sacrifices and choices made by women in leadership positions. And while women in the corporate world may face a number of choices and sacrifices through their careers, nothing can compare to the ultimate sacrifice taken on by the Canadian Army service members, their lives. And we would like to honor them this afternoon. The Captain Nichola Goddard Foundation supports servicewomen, veteran women, and their families who, like Captain Goddard, protect the values inherent to Canada and stand on guard for those less fortunate around the world. Whether it's through the dinners like the ones that have been held over the last few weeks or through today's fireside chat, the Captain Nichola Goddard series embodies the spirit of leadership. This event highlights the diversity of initiatives supported by True Patriot Love, Canada's foundation for the military community. Lysander, following in the footsteps of our affiliate Canso Investment Council, has been a supporter of True Patriot Love and its many initiatives over the years. In fact, just this week, Canso's very own Chief Investment Officer and CEO, John Carswell, was awarded the King Charles III Coronation Medal by the True Patriot Love Foundation, in acknowledgement of his ongoing charitable service to Canadians. Lysander is a proud affiliate of Canso and is dedicated to supporting True Patriot Love initiatives across Canada through events such as the Captain Nichola Goddard series. We see this partnership as an opportunity to not only contribute to the success of the foundation, but also learn from the incredible experiences and ideas that will be shared by today's speakers. As a sponsor, we are committed to supporting programs that drive meaningful change and create lasting impact in this field. This event series is a testament to what can be achieved when we unite around a shared purpose. Thank you to the organizers for your hard work and dedication in bringing this series to life. From all of us at Lysander Funds, we hope you find today's Fireside Chat a memorable event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sydney. I would now like to take a moment to introduce our guests for today. First, Abel Wren, retired Gwen Settle, was born into a military family and enlisted in the Royal Canadian Navy in 1962. She became part of the Women's Royal Canadian Naval Service known as the Wrens, who performed a wide variety of roles both in Canada and abroad. Gwen was part of a top secret group whose work consisted of tracking, analyzing, and reporting Soviet submarine movements during the Cold War. Gwen lives in Abbotsford, BC, where she is a dedicated community volunteer. She serves in leadership roles across her community in innumerable organizations. We met Gwen because she volunteered to lead the Fraser Valley Canadian Walk for Veterans last year and again this year. She's a registered speaker with the Memory Project, and she shares her story nationwide. Her contributions have earned her the Archway Community Builders Award, the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Medallion, and we, True Patriot Love, were honored to award or to nominate Gwen for the King Charles III Coronation Medal. And finally, she will be appointed to a Dame of the Order of St. George on April 26. Welcome, Gwen. We're so glad to have you here today.
Thank you.
Next, I'd love to introduce Chief Warrant Officer retired Shelley Lamothe. Shelley is now the Director of Learning and Development at MedCan, where she designs leadership programs, talent strategies, and coaching to build high-performance teams. She served 27 years in the Canadian Armed Forces with the Royal Canadian Medical Corps and held senior leadership roles. She deployed overseas to Bosnia and Afghanistan. She teaches at the graduate level. She's advised the Surgeon General, and Shelley has been inducted into the Order of Military Merit. In all of her spare time, Shelley also founded a Disciplined Direction Consulting, which supports the development of resilient teams. She was recently published in the Canadian Military Journal for her work on the future of leadership. And outside work, she volunteers with Treble Vector, which is an organization that mentors transitioning military members as they move into the civilian workforce, and supports the Quilts of Honor. Welcome, Shelley.
Thanks, Eleanor.
It is such a delight to have you both here today. And to get started, I would just like you to tell us about your journey, why you joined the military, what you feel your most significant experiences were, and what service has meant to you. And I'm going to start first with Gwen and add this little piece of context. When Gwen started serving, it was at a time when women in the Canadian Armed Forces were reduced in size after the Second World War. There was a cap of only 1,500 people, women, who were allowed to serve at that time. And it is at this moment in time that Gwen finds her way joining the Canadian military. Can you please tell us a bit about your story, Gwen?
Well, as you said, I came from a military family. And when I was supposedly upstairs in bed when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I would sit on the landing to the second story and listen whenever my dad had any of his Navy buddies over, listen to all their stories. And I thought that was so much adventure. That's what I wanted in my life. So I always, from the time I was quite young, wanted to go into the Navy. And so when I was 18, I was finally able to. and signed up in Ottawa. We were living in Ontario then, and went through basic training in Cornwallis. As At that time, no women were allowed to serve on ships. We were only serving in land bases. So that was a little bit of a disappointment there, but I went in knowing that. Um, I was fortunate enough after basic training, and I was picked for naval operations as my trade, and went to the base in Halifax, HMCS Stadacona, for trades training. Then, for some miraculous reason, I was chosen among 11 others, there were 12 of us in total, to go on a specialized course at Naval Fleet School in Key West, Florida, to learn what would become my eventual job, which was codenamed Oceanographic Research. And that's where as you said, we searched for Russian submarines. So we learned about it there. Everything was extremely top secret. Even in the school where we took our courses, instead of lockers, our books were kept in safes, and we were in a special wing guarded by a green door, guarded by Marines. Once we were past that green door, even within the school, we couldn't say anything to anyone about what we were learning. Then we were sent to Shelburne, Nova Scotia, on the Atlantic coast of Nova Scotia, and we worked shift work, changed shifts every 3 days in a large building that was windowless and surrounded by barbed wire. And in there, we analyzed the sounds coming from the ocean and could pick out the what we hoped would have been, or for any nuclear submarines, and we'd have to pass that information along so that they can decide whether it was Soviet or American, or which nuclear subs. We could tell that in our equipment. But yeah, I did that for about 2.5 years, changing shifts every 3 days.
What an incredible story. And at this time, you were just a teenager, right?
That's right. I was 18 when I joined, and I just served the one enlistment. So I was 21 years old when I released.
Right. And I want to pull on a thread here that we talked about in our previous conversation before we go to you, Shelley. And that is that as shocking as it was for me to hear this, I think it's really important because a lot of people may feel the way you expressed that you felt. And that was that you somehow felt that you might not measure up to be part of this conversation. Could you share a
Yes,
little bit about that?
right. Because I just served, there I do, say it again, just. I've been told, don't say just, because it was 3 years that I served. I never went overseas. I was never in any combat. I was never in any real danger. So when I saw other women later on who had served, like Shelley, who had served overseas, who were in combat zones, I felt like I didn't measure up. And I always thought, it would be so nice that if I had done something like that. And for a long time, I didn't think that the work I did was very meaningful. And then later on in 2013, I read an article in Legion magazine called Serving in Silence, and it described what we did at Shelburne. And I realized that, son of a gun, if we weren't on duty 24/7, we were looking for these subs that could carry nuclear missiles that could have taken out Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, and had to be constantly vigil. And so what I did actually was important, very important, and very relevant. So, though there's still, I think you can tell there's still a little bit of a feeling in there that I'm not quite, up to stuff.
Which, when we hear the significance of your story, the significance of the operational impact, the top secret nature of your work when you were only a teenager, like for all of us, we're just in awe of those accomplishments. But it really speaks to this pervasive sense of I'm not good enough that seems to permeate the veteran community, or
Yeah.
I'm not really a veteran. And I know that a lot of the people who are listening today likely have felt that themselves. And I know I too have felt that myself. I didn't have this experience or that experience, and so I'm not as much of a veteran. And I hope by the end of this conversation, we're encouraging more and more people to recognize the power, no matter how you serve.
Now I'm very proud to say
Yes.
that I'm a veteran, and to speak, as I say, with the Memory Project, I speak to all sorts of groups, a lot of schools and other organizations, and it's funny, the kids are amazed when I ask them how long they can keep a secret, when I tell them I had to keep one for 35 years.
Yes. Wonderful. I'd love now to move to Shelley and have you tell us about your journey, why you joined the military, some of the key foundational experiences that shaped you as a leader, and if you could share with us what is your experience of sacrifice, which was the theme of our leadership panel in the locations across Canada. Over to you, Shelley.
There's a lot in that.
I know, it's a big question.
Well, let's see. Well, let's start back at the beginning, I guess. I joined the reserves first as a medic because up until then, meeting some people that were already in the reserves, I thought the only thing I knew about the military was that you dug holes in shotguns, and I thought, well, that's not really kind of up my alley. So we'll maybe wait. And then I figured out there was this whole medical corps thing, and I thought, oh, well, that's more up my alley. Let's go check that out instead. So school wasn't really my thing as I was attempting to go to university as a history and classics major. And so I skipped school for a morning and went to the recruiting center in Hamilton instead. I stayed in the reserves for a couple of years, got some amazing opportunities to learn and start understanding what it really meant to be a medic, and did that with reserve infantry unit for a little while, and then thought, you know what, this isn't so bad. Maybe we could do this longer. So then I joined the Reg Force after that and went all over the place. And I think out of my whole career, there's three big highlight spots. So the first one came in 2006. It started in 2005, but I didn't realize the significance until after I deployed with it. We deployed the field hospital for the first time since Korea out of the Canadian Field Hospital. And 2 weeks into my posting in Petawawa, they asked me to pack it up to send it. And I said, I don't even know what goes in it yet. So 25 years old, scrambling to figure out what goes in a field hospital, and we figured it out and deployed it into Kandahar. And then I was lucky, unlucky, depending on how you want to take your perspective, to follow it into theater and then set it up when we took over from the Americans in Kandahar City. Second one, I was incredibly fortunate to be working with our Directorate of Strategy at Health Services headquarters, and was asked to write the statement of requirement for the new LAV6 ambulance variant. And I couldn't understand why it was such a rush, and then politically figured that out a couple of months later. and then got appointed as the technical advisor and was able to stay with the project until almost delivery, which was a little bit unheard of. But I was the running joke with my first project manager, of which I had four, was that they were going to etch my name in the bottom of the first one that came off the line. But to leave a bit of a legacy behind for the medical technicians, to give them an opportunity to have something new, which had not been on the books for as long as I had served at that point, to finally replace our very old and aging fleet of armored vehicles was really exciting. And then the last one was to be able to share with my family what all that time away and sacrifice meant when I got to go to Rideau Hall when I was inducted into the Order of Military Merit, and be able to share that very special day with my husband and my son. And that sacrifice came in the form of my son went to 4 schools in 5 years, had some struggles. I had to do one posting on IR, then got told I was a mobility problem. And as I was trying to figure out what sort of the twilight of my career was going to look like, it was starting to look like now I need to choose family or service, but I'm not allowed to have both.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And that's a, you know, the sacrifice that you describe so poignantly is, you know, it's one that builds upon itself, doesn't it? You know, you sacrifice your family, you see the impact, and it doesn't get better over time. It tends to get worse over time. And so I think that experience is broadly shared, and I think particularly acute for women, given the role we tend to take in our families. Do you feel that that's a fair statement?
I would say that's definitely fair. And I think the compounding factor to that was because this was at the very end of my career, the system, although trying to change, still holds on to some sacred cow beliefs on where you need to have come from and what pedigree you have to have in order to move into certain positions. And ultimately, we came to a disagreement, and I made my choice.
Right. And recently, you have been published in the Canadian Military Journal, and you wrote about leadership and character. And I would love to hear what compelled you to write about that. I have a little insight and kind of what your key thesis was about that.
So it came from, honestly, it was a labor of love. There was 100 books read and articles researched, and it was it was an opportunity to really dig into some concepts in the midst of trying to reinvigorate culture change. What does that look like for the service moving forward as we came out with our new character-based leadership model and improved our 360 review for senior positions, and where were we going, where were we headed? And because I was working at the Canadian Forces College, I had access to pretty much all the resources I could ever want to read. And because I was there on imposed restrictions, which meant my family remained in Ottawa and I was in Toronto, I had nothing else to do with my evenings. So I read a lot and made a lot of notes, and then started framing it together on, out of all the leaders that I saw continue to get propelled forward based on performance and not potential, what was their biggest gap? And that's where I landed on self-reflection for self-awareness, because many of them had lots of ego, lots of id, no self-awareness, and really didn't understand that you need to be fully present and understand where you sit and your effect on the room. And it was a message that was given to me by one of my very first sergeants when I was a young private, and my impact on my peers. And so that began that journey for me around self-awareness. And then it continued on through my career. And then as I struggled after my second tour to Afghanistan, through some hard work with my psychologist to battle my PTSD demons down, discovered that same self-awareness skill that I had used in my leadership all those years was equally valuable in trying to assess where and how things fit, because it's not a logical pathway.
It's such great insight. And you're right, that self-awareness, it's not intuitive to many people. It's something that we need to pay special attention to, because the impact that we bring as leaders to the room is palpable. You can feel it. And on that note, I would love to start to talk about some of the changes that we've seen over the decades that are represented on this Zoom screen. And I'm going to turn to Gwen and ask you to talk about kind of what you have observed, sort of what things were like back in 1962 and how you perceive some differences today. And then I'm going to come back to you, Shelley, and we'll talk about some of those same themes.
Well, those were in rather the early days, as I said before. There weren't very many women in the force. We were restricted in the types of trades we could be in. Most of them were clerical or as a cook, or you could be in communications. The one I was fortunate enough to get into, naval operations, was the one that was the closest activity that women could get into for active service, really. And so I was, very excited. That's the one I wanted, and I had my fingers crossed when they were choosing. So, and I never expected to get into the one I did where we did the top secret work. But at the time I was in, if you were married, if you got married, you were released. There's no way that you could stay. You had to be single in order to stay in the forces at that time. Same with things like dress code. For example, in basic training, if we were on a work party and we're in our work dungarees, and the guys could go to their meals at the mess just as they were. We couldn't. We had to march back to our barracks, get dressed into our nylons, our skirts, ties, white shirts, jackets, and then we could march over to our meals. So there was that difference there, which still, when I think about it, still grates on me today. I believe at that time, if we wanted to wear slacks, walk base and wear slacks, we had to get written permission to do it, except for those of us that were at Shelburne and we were outfitted with special uniforms that had slacks. So that was another thing I was quite pleased about there. It was, I say there wasn't the opportunities, the advancement just wasn't there for women.
Yeah.
Very restrictive at that time. Now it's opened up a lot, and with so many trades and so many ranks available to women now, it's to what I had back then, it's mind-blowing.
It's true. It's been truly remarkable steps forward. And Canada has led the world on the integration of women into all trades. I'm a physical representation of the integration of women into the infantry. And we have so much to be proud of in that domain. And I'd love to turn to Shelley now and talk about your perception of it. What has inspired you about our journey? What has disappointed you? And what do we have still to change?
I know we still have a ways to go. Joining in the mid 90s, although the Charter of Rights and Freedoms came out well before that, apparently the memo got lost the time I joined. Corporal punishment was still very much a thing in basic training. Failing as many of the girls as you could was definitely still a thing. I remember doing 300 push-ups because my weapon may have touched the ground slightly more firmly than it should have coming off of a truck. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So, so that's where I started. 2003, I was trying to do my paperwork to be posted to Germany. And my warrant officer almost didn't sign off because he thought it was BS. I didn't have to sign a waiver that promised I wasn't going to get pregnant while I was over there,
Mhm.
because that shouldn't be allowed. So I said, okay, well, that's lovely. Should he ever catch wind of this particular webcast, then I can assure him I did not until many years later. Um, and then I think it was 2008. I was in Suffield, and apparently I caused an international incident because I had taken our team of about 90 medics to Suffield to go do a training exercise that was incredibly interactive with a bunch of infantry skills and section attacks and medical skills dabbled in so that everybody was prepared for their position and post when we got there. But we were all staying in the same H hut, mixed gender, on the Battis side, which was the British side. And it had been a really long trip to get there. And I had finally gotten all the troops down to bed. I had just crawled into my sleeping bag. And I get, who's in charge here? Screaming down the flats. And I was like, no, 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 no. This is not what we're doing. So I get up and I'm like, shh, keep your voice down. And he's like, you're a girl. And I was like, thanks. And I'm a really tired one, and you're waking up my troops. So get outside. So he didn't like any of my answers to that conversation because I told him to get out of my business. And then when I showed up on the Canadian side for the team to start training, I was informed that we may need to segregate. And I said, fat
Mhm.
chance of that. I said, we're all going to combat together. I said, we're not going to be separated now because we're not going to be separated then. Everybody needs to figure it out right now.
Right. You know, that's a fascinating story. And I had some similar experiences and found on the other side of those experiences that often allied nations would say, you know what, I didn't think it could work, but you guys like demonstrate that it does work. Did you ever have that kind of feedback?
I certainly didn't get it from the British contingent while I was in Suffield. But I have gotten that from my Australian colleagues when I was in Afghanistan, my British colleagues, my American colleagues. So yes.
Yeah. Um, and you know, you left the Canadian Armed Forces not that long ago. You've seen the progress, you've seen the challenges. And what would you do if there were some changes to be made? Can you offer any insight on what you think, what you think needs to change? This was a point that came from three different guests who are watching, so I'm asking.
Sure. So I left the CAF in February of last year with an official release date of 7 March 2024. So I've been gone just over a year now. Some of the recommendations that I did make and had written in papers for my leadership training included redesigning what basic training looks like. You don't need to yell and scream at people and instill fear to create camaraderie and trust. So I understand that there needs to be a certain element, and I am just as hard as the next person, but yelling is for the parade square and safety infractions. Everything else can be handled with a conversation and some increased motivation. Maybe your voice might rise just a smidge. But for the most part, you don't need to yell and scream at people and break them down and break their spirit to rebuild them in your mold. It's not it's not how our society works. It's not how our young people live today think. It's not what they tolerate. And they've got very open views on how we need to move forward. The last thing I would change is if we are doing policy changes on how we're doing things and how we are selecting people, transparency is not the same across all the services. And that level of transparency on how you're doing things, what process you're using, how you're vetting people, and how you're making it fair and equitable, as opposed to putting female charts in a mix for a board that may or may not actually see it, just so your numbers are equitable.
Thank you. It's very, very good feedback. And both of those recommendations captured in the Arbor report, transparency on those sorts of things and also evolution of the training system. So thank you for that feedback from the field. I'd like to shift for a moment to talk about the impact of your service on your post-service life. And I'm going to go to Gwen and ask you first about, you had this very formative experience in this operational top secret role. And your service to Canada continued for years after that in very robust volunteerism. And I wonder, is there a connection between your service in uniform and your service to Canada after uniform?
Well, I think it's a combination of the discipline for work, being proud of the work I do. I didn't really get into volunteering until about 2002. I spent most of the other time working, raising a family, and basically a lot of those years being the sole support for that family.
Right.
In a variety of jobs. And it's I think, yeah, basically the attention to detail, the discipline were a lot of the things that made it seem natural to me to I just kept falling into these different leadership areas of the things I was doing. Just I've been very fortunate that I've, even in my career after I got out of the Navy, I fell into so many different opportunities in so many different industries that I used to call myself a generalist because I could do just about anything.
Right. And it looks like you're also great at identifying opportunities that are going to make your life exciting and rich and seizing them.
Timing is everything, I guess, and being open to listening to people or just kind of following your gut feeling sometimes, or just not saying, well, now I should start saying no, but back then, not saying no to different opportunities that come up.
Right.
But,
Great advice for all of us, to take the time to look around you and see what might be an opportunity that you're missing.
and one thing I tell, especially the kids that I talk to, is always treat everyone with respect. It doesn't matter if they're the person like a janitor somewhere or if they're CEO somewhere. Treat them the same. given the
Yes.
same respect. And that gives you untold benefits. You meet so many interesting people. You don't know what their lives have been, what they've gone through. And through that, I've had so many opportunities or just had such wonderful things happen just because I treated people well.
Yes.
And I tell them, please do that. If you learn nothing else, learn that.
And you're such a role model, Gwen, for so many, because you have the contribution that you're making to your community and the degree to which you are active and engaged in so many things. I really hope that I am where you are now when I am your age. It is inspiring. And Shelley, if I could move to you, you spent a lifetime in the Canadian Armed Forces, 27 years, and you were formed by your service. And now as you move into a very senior role in corporate Canada after you left service. And can you tell us a bit about what that transition was like and what in uniform has served you on the other side and perhaps what hasn't?
Okay. What served me is that, and I'm going to pick up on what Gwen said there on being a generalist.
Mm.
So, retiring where I did, I knew an awful lot of things and had done an awful lot of things across a wide spectrum that could be considered admin, operations, finance, medicine. So, out of all of that, what did I want to do? So that took a lot of soul searching. And I couldn't have done it without some really great mentors and guides on that had already gone to the other side. Because you need a dictionary to translate what all of those skills actually mean in corporate or civilian life in general. So there's some tools out there, but depending on your background, they may not serve you because they certainly didn't serve me because they're not holistic. But what served me well, I'm also going to steal Gwen's attention to detail, 100%. It is shocking how useful operational planning and battle procedure is in the outside world. We just don't call it that. Then um, comfort with risk is another big one that if you have planned appropriately and you've gone through your risk mitigation strategies, the sense of being comfortable with risk in general, with your decisions and what the outcomes and probable pathways are going to be is incredibly valuable.
Right.
Because I know there's been some of my peers that look at me, they're like, you always look so relaxed. And I'm like, because I've already figured out what the worst thing that could happen is, and I'm not worried about it.
Right. Well, that is such fascinating insight. And I too have felt that pieces of that in my own transition. And I think that what I'm hearing from both of you is that your service has informed your approach to volunteerism, your approach to employment, and in the work that we do supporting veteran employment. It's just fascinating to hear these stories. We are nearly out of time. And so I think that's going to need to be our last question for today. And so this concludes our fireside chat. And I would love to extend my heartfelt thanks to Chief Warrant Officer Shelley Lamothe and Able Ren Gwen Settle for helping us today to understand the differences and the journeys that they've both been on, serving in the 60s, serving later on. I see, Gwen, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I just want to say one final thing is
Indeed.
never stop learning. That's
Never
very
stop.
important.
There's no better way to conclude. Is there any final word you would like to offer to Shelley?
I know Gwen wants to learn how to start saying no, but don't say no. Don't say no to a network opportunity and don't say
No,
no to a
no.
chance to volunteer.
Don't say no and never stop learning. Couldn't be better ways to end it. And so with that, I'll offer my final thanks to Gwen and to Shelley. And finally, I would be thrilled if the audience would consider donating to the Captain Nichola Goddard Fund, which assists service women, veteran women, and their families. Your donation will be invested into a program that serves mental health, provides family assistance, enables rehabilitation and recovery, and you can donate at truepatriotlove.com/your-support. I would also be remiss to not note that Kate Goddard, Nichola's sister, is here with us in the audience today, and we thank her for her attendance and for her family's investment in ensuring that Nichola's legacy, which inspires all of us, continues. Thank you so much for joining us today.